Well, good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you again for another one of our morning prayer times together. It is Friday, it's the 4th of September, and we've been making our way through Mark's Gospel, and we're carrying that on now. And what we're doing for each of these is really honing in on these passages, just giving them a chance to kind of tell us what the story is, to really get into them, to really focus on them for ourselves. Now, what I've really enjoyed over the last few days is a bit of a conversation going on about the last reading that we had, and people kind of keeping the conversation going after the morning prayer. So in the last one, or in the one before, where Jesus was in Gethsemane and got arrested, and the disciples had swords. One of the questions was that came afterwards was, if Jesus was so against kind of rebellion, because in that particular story, when Jesus was arrested, one of his followers gets a sword and chops an ear off somebody, and Jesus says, "I'm not leading a rebellion. Put your swords away." And I think I talked about the idea that Jesus didn't want that violence type of thing. And somebody was saying, well, actually, what about the fact that in another part of the Bible, Jesus says, go get a sword. Why did the disciples have swords in the first place if Jesus was so against it? And it's a really interesting question. And I think it's important for these kind of things for us to feel able to be able to question things. And I absolutely 100% encourage it. And so I encourage that of you. If there are things kind of that you rise up, and even things that I say where you go, I'm not quite sure about you, or I'm not sure I'm in the same page as you, or I'm not sure where you're going with that, or I'm not sure I agree with you, that's not a problem. In fact, that's really healthy, because the only way that this really works is if we each grapple with these things individually and really explore them for ourselves. And that includes continuing to ask questions, and it includes kind of debate and conversation about things. What does this really mean? You said this, well, I think this. And that's why I always encourage you not just to listen to these, but actually to read afterwards, to think about it, to let God kind of work after the morning prayer, and not just take what I've read as the absolute kind of, you can't disagree with it, because you can. There'll be things come out of it that you see that I don't. There'll be an angle that you have which isn't mine, which will be different, and we can talk about that. And actually, by doing that together, we discover even more about the depth of these particular stories, even more about the depth of Jesus, even more about the depth of God and God's character. So I 100% encourage you, after this, to read the passages for yourselves, to see what's going on, and to question things, and to explore it. And that involves conversation kind of going on afterwards. So bless you guys. So today we're into a very famous story. So what's just happened is, like I was saying, Jesus has been arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. Judas has betrayed him, and Jesus has been led off. First of all, he's been led off to the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is like the high court in the Jewish faith. It's a place full of authority with the elders and the priests. Very important place. And what's happened is people have been basically paid to tell stories about Jesus, but none of it is adding up. They all kind of tell different testimonies, and there isn't actually anything that they can stick to Jesus. But Jesus doesn't say a word until the chief priest, the high priest, asks him, basically, are you the Son of God? Are you the person that other people are saying you are? And for the first time, Jesus speaks and says, I am. I am. And what happens afterwards is he is condemned for blasphemy, because that's an incredibly blasphemous thing to say. They've that's kind of sealed his fate by responding in that way. The interesting thing about the I am phrase, that when Jesus says I am, it links very much with the phrase God uses when he describes who he is. In the story of Moses, when he's at the kind of shrub that's burning, all the way back in the Old Testament, Moses finds this shrub and it's burning, but it's not been consumed. And God describes himself as I am. God sends Moses to go and talk to the Pharaoh to bring the people out of slavery, to bring God's people out of slavery. And Moses says, who shall I say sent me? I mean, who's going to believe any of this? And God says, say, I am sent me. God describes himself as I am. So when Jesus says that phrase, I am, there's a lot of symbolism behind it, and it's why it was so blasphemous. So that's just happened. Jesus has said that. He's confirmed that he is the Son of God, and that is it done. Deal done. They beat him up, they stone him, they spit on him, they hand him over to soldiers, and now Jesus is being led away. He's going to meet with Pilate soon, but now there's no doubt that he's heading towards crucifixion. While all this was going on, Peter, one of Jesus' followers, had actually followed Jesus, but at a big distance, so nobody could kind of link the two. So while Jesus was there being tried before the high Jewish court, Peter's in the courtyard, but staying very much out of sight. And we pick his story up now with Jesus being led away by the guards to go and meet with the Roman authority, namely Pilate. So, this is Mark chapter 14, verse 66. Peter disowns Jesus. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely. You were also with that Nazarene, Jesus, she said. But Peter denied it. I don't know or understand what you're talking about. And he went out into the entrance. When the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around, This fellow's one of them. And again Peter denied it. After a little while, those standing near to Peter said to him, Surely you're one of them, for you're a Galilean. He began to call down curses on himself, and he swore to them, I don't know the man that you're talking about. Immediately the cockerel crowed, and Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken to him. Before the cockerel crows twice, you'll disown me 3 times. And Peter broke down and wept. Now here we have a deeply human aspect of this story. Jesus has just said he is the Son of God. So we have this ultimate kind of divinity, the divine side of the story. The most incredible thing is happening. Jesus is the Son of God. And he talks in this answer, when Jesus is talking to the high priest, of how he will sit at the right hand of God, and they will see him descending on clouds. It's the most amazing image. And we flip from something extraordinarily divine to something amazingly human. Peter. Now, Peter's brave enough to follow Christ, but only brave enough to stay at a massive distance so nobody kind of links the two. But he's starting to get recognised. Now remember that Jesus and his disciples have been in Jerusalem for a few days now. They've especially been in the temple quite a lot. They've been in the courtyard quite a lot. So people would have seen them. And so he's starting to get recognised. Aren't you one of the ones that was with him? Oh, no, not me. And so the story goes on, and we see this thing go on where Peter is asked 3 times, I'm sure you're one of them. I'm sure you're one of his followers. And Peter denies it and denies it. And at the last bit, he's so strenuous in his denials that he kind of calls down curses. Curse me if I'm not telling the truth. Curse me if I do know that man. I'm telling you the truth. I don't know who that man is. I'm nothing to do with him. Now, Jesus had predicted that this would happen. After the Last Supper, when he'd had that final meal with his friends and they'd kind of gone out, Jesus tells them, he says, you're all going to fall away. You're all going to deny that you even know me. You're all going to run and you're going to scatter when it gets difficult. And Peter is the one who stands up and goes, I'd never do that. To the point of death, I'll follow you. And Jesus goes, no, you won't. You will deny even knowing me 3 times. And when that happens, you will hear a cockerel crow. So Peter denies knowing Jesus 3 times. He hears the cockerel crow and he just breaks down and he weeps. Now here we could judge Peter a lot about his lack of friendship, his lack of loyalty. We could say, hang on a minute, he should have been standing right there with Christ. He should have said, yes, I am one of his followers. I am his friend. I do know him. But Peter's suffering from one of the biggest things that we all suffer. but we don't talk about it a lot. And that's fear. Peter's scared. He knows what the Romans and the people in authority are capable of, and he's scared about it. Too often what we think is, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, it's gone. There we go. Too often what we think is it's kind of, you're not allowed to be scared. You're not allowed to have fear, especially if you're a follower of God. Oh my word, you're not allowed to have fear with God. If you call yourself a Christian, you can't be scared of anything. God's with you, so you just gotta bowl on with it and get on with it. Now, life is full of things that are scary, and sometimes our reaction to them is to kind of curl up into a ball and run. I don't feel judgment for Peter, because I can't tell you that I wouldn't have done the same thing. What Peter faced was something very scary. He faced being beaten up, probably being killed. I wonder what you would do in that situation. Loyalty, friendship is only really tested when things are going wrong. Peter had said all the right words. I'll be with you right until the end of the end of time. I'll be there. Even if it means death, I'll be with you. Easy words. But here it's really tested. And Peter, because he's scared, well, he wants to preserve himself. He goes, I don't know who he is. But he breaks down and he weeps. He knows instantly what he's done. He knows that he hasn't stood with Christ. And again, we could all judge that and say, well, he should have done. He should have been there with him. But let's be honest, there's times when you and I have done the same thing, when we haven't stood with people that we should have done because we're afraid of what people might say. Maybe we're afraid that we would be judged in the same way as they are. It's not easy to stand and be loyal to people sometimes. In fact, it can be very unpopular. We need to really think about our actions and what motivates them. In that moment, Peter wasn't thinking about anything else other than his own preservation. And I can't blame him for that, because I've done the same. I've even done the same with my faith. I've kind of pretended that I don't have one, or I haven't admitted that I go to church. I haven't admitted that I'm a vicar, because sometimes you worry about the reaction you're going to get. What are people going to think if I tell them that I actually go to church? What are people going to think if I tell them I'm a Christian? What are people going to think if I tell them I'm a vicar? What it becomes is about self-preservation. So actually, I'm Peter sometimes. Do you know who that man is? Oh, no, I don't go to church. No, I'm not. So I think on the one hand, we need to be careful not to judge Peter, but on the other hand, what it highlights is when our faith, our loyalties, and our friendship are truly tested, what do we base our response on? Is it just on what we want, on our self-preservation? I will follow Christ up until the point at which it becomes unpopular to do so, or difficult to do so, or I'm going to be judged by that. I will stick with this person as long as it's kind of beneficial for me and as long as it works for me. When it doesn't, well, they're on their own. What we see in the stories of the gospel, what we see in the stories of Jesus are two things going on. One, the divine, the kind of overarching story, Jesus being the Son of God, as he's just told the authorities, and what his death is going to mean. And we're going to get really into that as we head towards it. What is going on in that overall story, that extraordinary divine narrative across all of time and all of humanity? It's a huge story. But that story is put directly against very intimate human stories, one-on-one human stories. So we go from Jesus, the divine and the big story, the Son of God, to Peter being incredibly human, being scared and wanting to preserve himself. you see these two going together, and that is the story in microcosm of the entire gospel. That is the story of God and Jesus on earth. That is it right there. The divine, the overarching huge story that we get to be a part of, that we get to be invited of, that Peter gets to be invited of. The one where Jesus is here and God has acted to save all of humanity, to give hope and light and all of those things, mixed in with very individual human stories. And that is the truth of the story now. So we are part of a huge faith. There's a lot going on with it. The notion of God still being at work, a massive kind of thing to talk about the God of the universe, and again what Jesus' death means for us now and his resurrection, and all those things to get into alongside our day-to-day human stories, which is why these things are incredible. I can really relate to Peter in this story. I really can. It was an incredibly difficult thing to stand up and say, yes, that's me, because he knew he would have died as well. It's no wonder he didn't say that. He knew him, but he also knows that at the moment when his friendship and loyalty was tested, he stepped away and said, I don't know who he is. Where did that decision come from? It came from fear. This is Peter, who not long ago, Jesus was walking on the water towards the boat, and Peter calls out to him and says, if it is you, tell me and I'll come out and meet you. Jesus says, yes, it's me, coming out. And Peter starts to walk on the water and is doing fine. But when the waves start to rise up and it all starts to get a bit scary, even though he can see Jesus right in front of him, Peter starts to think, this is ridiculous. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. And he starts to sink. And Jesus pulls him up out the water, and together they go back to the boat. Well, here again, we see the same story. Peter has utter faith in Christ. I'll follow you until death. Just lead the way. But now, as Peter's actually walking towards Christ, seeing him being arrested, seeing him being questioned and now led off, Peter's starting to sink again. He's starting to lose that confidence and that faith that he had. It's disappearing and he's going under. And the beauty of this story, well, it's actually towards right at the end of the whole thing, after Jesus has been resurrected. There's a scene, and we'll come to it at the end, but there's a scene where Peter is on the boat with the rest of his disciples. They see Jesus on the shoreline after he's come back to life, after being crucified. He's making breakfast, and Jesus and Peter have a conversation. And it's the very same thing of Jesus pulling Peter out of the water and then walking. Peter is still ashamed at his actions. But the conversation him and Jesus have is one of reconciliation, one of forgiveness, one of love for one another. And Peter is brought back and set on a new path. There will be times when we get it wrong. There'll be times when we're tested and the fear's too much and we don't do that which we know we should do. We don't stand where we should do. And with our faith, there'll be times when we, to put it really bluntly, we let Christ down. We don't do what we should do. But the beauty of this is, even though we sink, Jesus will pull us up. He will set us on the path and he will walk it again with us, just as happened with Peter. What I invite you to do is to read through this passage again. Mark 14, start to read at verse 46. 44, I think. 66, sorry, that was it. Verse 66. Have a read through it for yourself. See what's going on there. What's your response to it? What kind of things does it bring up in you? What does it remind you of? What does it make you think about? And then have a pray about it. What we're going to do is say the Lord's Prayer, and then we're going to get on with our day. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Okay, guys, have a lovely Friday and the weekend. We're back here with another service online on Sunday on the YouTube channel. So I look forward to seeing you then, 10:15 Sunday morning. That's available. And we'll be back next week for more morning prayer. So whenever you're watching this, whenever you're catching up with it, may God be with you. Be at peace. Stay safe. And I'll see you soon. Take care.